The picnic table crashed to the ground with a thunderous bang that silenced the entire Meadowbrook Hills community barbecue. 10-year-old Jaden Martinez sat frozen in his wheelchair, his fingers still reaching for the tablet that Officer Bradley Kowalski had just ripped from his hands. The boy's mouth opened in a soundless scream, his dark eyes wide with terror, as the device that gave him his voice disappeared into the officer's meaty grip. "Unauthorized electronics at a community event," Kowalski barked, his badge catching the late afternoon sunlight. "Kid could be recording us, taking pictures of our patrol procedures." Jaden's grandmother, Linda Martinez, dropped her homemade apple pie to the grass and rushed toward her grandson. She had seen that look before the panic that seized Jaden when his world suddenly became incomprehensible, when the bridge between his thoughts and the outside world vanished without warning. "That's his communication device," Linda's voice carried across the suddenly silent barbecue area. "He's autistic. He needs that to speak." Officer Kowalski's partner, Detective Sarah Chen, stepped forward with her hand resting on her service weapon. "Ma'am, step back. We're investigating a potential security breach." The absurdity of it would have been laughable, if not for the genuine fear rippling through the crowd of neighbors. Just moments before, Jaden had been using his augmentative and alternative communication software to order a hot dog, his finger tapping carefully on the tablet screen to form the words, "Hot dog, please. No mustard. Thank you." The pride on Linda's face had been radiant as she watched her grandson navigate the social interaction with the volunteer cook, Mrs. Henderson from Maple Street. Now that same Mrs. Henderson stood paralyzed by her grill, tongs suspended in midair, watching as the scene unfolded with the horrible inevitability of a car crash. Jaden's hands began to flap, a self-soothing behavior that Linda recognized as his way of processing overwhelming stress. The rhythmic motion was barely perceptible, but to those who knew him, it was a clear signal that he was retreating into himself, trying to cope with a world that had suddenly turned hostile. "Give him back his tablet," Linda said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "He's just a child." Kowalski held the device up, examining it with exaggerated suspicion. "Lots of fancy tech here. Camera, microphone, internet connection. Perfect for surveillance." "It's an iPad with communication software," Linda explained, fighting to keep her voice calm. "It costs $3,000 and took us 2 years to get insurance approval. It's his voice." Detective Chen circled around to Linda's side, her posture aggressive. "And how do we know you're not using this kid as cover for some kind of intelligence operation? Disabled child, high-tech equipment, elderly handler?" The crowd of neighbors began to murmur, some stepping back, others moving closer. Tom Bradley from the HOA board pushed through the growing circle of onlookers, his face flushed with embarrassment and confusion. "Officers, there must be some misunderstanding," Tom began. "This is just our annual community barbecue. The Martinez family has lived here for 15 years. Kowalski's eyes narrowed as he looked at Tom. "Are you interfering with a police investigation, sir?" The threat hung in the air like smoke. Tom's mouth opened and closed wordlessly, ironically. He found himself as speechless as Jaden, though for entirely different reasons. Linda felt her chest tighten with a familiar fury. She had spent decades fighting for Jaden's rights, battling school districts, insurance companies, and ignorant officials who saw her grandson as a problem to be managed rather than a child to be protected. But this was different. This was a violation so profound it took her breath away. Jaden's flapping had intensified, and he was rocking back and forth in his wheelchair, making a low humming sound that Linda recognized as his distress call. She took a step toward him, but Detective Chen blocked her path. "Don't move, ma'am. We haven't cleared you for approach." He's my grandson. He's having a panic attack. He's a potential security risk until we determine otherwise. The conversation was taking on the surreal quality of a bad dream. Linda could see her neighbors' faces, some shocked, some confused, a few nodding along with the officer's assessment. She recognized the look in their eyes, the relief that comes from watching someone else's child be targeted, the uncomfortable gratitude that it wasn't their family under scrutiny. Officer Kowalski began examining the tablet more closely, his thick fingers prodding at the screen. Look at all these apps, recording software, note-taking, even GPS tracking. This thing's a surveillance goldmine. Those are communication and learning apps, Linda said, her voice rising despite her efforts to stay calm. He uses them to tell us when he's hungry, when he's scared, when he needs help. That tablet is his lifeline to the world. Kowalski looked up with a sneer. Real convenient story. Grandma, autistic kid, can't talk, needs special computer, makes a perfect cover for espionage activities. The accusation was so outrageous that several neighbors gasped audibly. Mrs. Henderson finally found her voice. Officer, that's ridiculous. Jaden is just a little boy. Detective Chen wheeled on her. Ma'am, are you vouching for these individuals? Are you willing to take responsibility for any illegal activities they might be conducting? Mrs. Henderson's courage evaporated as quickly as it had appeared. She stepped back, shaking her head. I don't know anything about that. Linda watched the community solidarity crumble in real time. These were people who had smiled and waved at Jaden for years, who had watched him grow up, who had seen him struggle and celebrate small victories, but faced with the possibility of being associated with illegal activities. They were abandoning him without a second thought. Jaden's humming grew louder, and he began hitting the side of his wheelchair with his fist, a behavior that meant he was approaching a complete meltdown. Linda knew she had minutes, maybe seconds, before he would be completely unreachable. Please, she begged, her professional composure finally cracking. Just give him the tablet for a moment. Let him calm down. He's terrified. Officer Kowalski looked at the boy with disdain. Maybe he should learn to control himself like a normal kid. The words hit Linda like a physical blow. In 3 decades of advocacy work, she had heard every cruel comment, every ignorant assumption, every casual dismissal of her grandson's humanity. But hearing it from a law enforcement officer, in front of their entire community, was a new kind of pain. Detective Chen stepped closer to Linda, her voice dropping to a threatening whisper. Here's what's going to happen. We're confiscating this device pending investigation. You and the boy are going to leave this event immediately. And if we find any evidence of surveillance or illegal activity, you'll both be arrested. Linda felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. On what charges? Conspiracy to commit espionage, child endangerment, interfering with law enforcement operations. Should I go on? The creative fiction would have been impressive if it weren't so terrifying. Linda recognized the tactic pile on enough official-sounding charges to intimidate people into compliance. She had seen it used against other families, other vulnerable individuals who couldn't fight back. But they had picked the wrong grandmother to intimidate. Tom Bradley cleared his throat nervously. Officers, perhaps we could resolve this without involving arrest. The HOA could implement a policy about electronic devices at community events. Detective Chen smiled for the first time since approaching their table. Now, that's a reasonable suggestion. How about a complete ban on recording devices at all community functions for security purposes? Of course. Linda felt her heart sink as she watched Tom nod eagerly. Yes, that makes perfect sense. We'll draft a new community guideline immediately. Excellent. The Martinez family will be excluded from all future community events, until they can guarantee compliance with the no technology policy. The sentence was delivered with casual brutality, in one stroke. They were banning Jaden from every community gathering, every barbecue, every holiday celebration. They were cutting him off from the social connections that had taken years to build. Jaden's humming stopped abruptly. Linda looked at him and saw something that terrified her more than his panic attack's resignation. At 10 years old, her grandson was learning that the world would always find reasons to exclude him, that his needs would always be seen as inconvenient, that his difference would always be treated as a threat. Officer Kowalski raised the tablet above his head, and Linda realized with horror what he was about to do. "No!" she screamed, lunging forward. The tablet hit the concrete with a sickening crack. The screen spiderwebbed instantly. The delicate electronics inside scattered across the barbecue area like electronic confetti. $3,000 of technology, 2 years of insurance battles, countless hours of configuration and customization, all destroyed in a moment of casual cruelty. Jaden's scream was soundless, but unmistakable. His face contorted in anguish as he watched the pieces of his voice scattered across the ground. He reached out with both hands, straining against his wheelchair restraints, trying to gather the fragments of his destroyed communication device. The crowd stood in stunned silence. Even those who had been nodding along with the officer's actions seemed shocked by the deliberate destruction of the child's equipment. Detective Chen grabbed Linda's arm roughly. "You're under arrest for interfering with a police investigation and harboring surveillance equipment." Linda felt the handcuffs close around her wrists, the metal cold against her skin. She looked around at her neighbors, hoping to see some spark of human decency, some willingness to stand up for what was right. Instead, she saw people looking away, checking their phones, suddenly finding reasons to leave the barbecue early. The community that had smiled at Jaden's small victories, that had praised his progress, that had claimed to embrace diversity and inclusion, was abandoning him in his moment of greatest need. Tom Bradley approached Officer Kowalski with obvious reluctance. "What should we do about the boy?" Kowalski looked at Jaden with undisguised disgust. "Call social services. Kid's clearly disturbed, and his guardian is in custody for federal crimes." Linda's blood turned to ice. "You cannot take him into custody. I'm his legal guardian. I have rights." "Not anymore," Detective Chen said with satisfaction. "Suspected terrorists don't get custody rights." The word terrorist sent a ripple of fear through the remaining crowd. Linda saw neighbors she had known for years suddenly looking at her with suspicion and fear. The transformation was complete. She and Jaden had been redefined from community members to threats in the space of an hour. But Officer Kowalski had made one crucial error. In his eagerness to demonstrate his authority, in his casual cruelty toward a disabled child, in his willingness to destroy thousands of dollars of medical equipment, he had revealed his true nature to someone who was uniquely qualified to respond. Linda Martinez was not just any grandmother. She was not just any community advocate. She was not just any concerned citizen who could be intimidated into silence. Linda Martinez was a career prosecutor with the United States Department of Justice, specializing in civil rights violations and federal crimes. She was on temporary leave to care for Jaden after his recent surgery, but her federal credentials were very much active. And Officer Kowalski had just committed multiple federal crimes in front of dozens of witnesses while claiming to act under color of law. Linda took a deep breath and made a decision that would change everything. She reached into her jacket pocket slowly, carefully, making sure both officers could see her movements, and withdrew a leather credential case. "Officers," she said, her voice suddenly calm and professional, "I'm going to show you my identification now." Detective Chen tightened her grip on Linda's arm. We already know who you are. Lady Linda Martinez, resident of 47 Maple Street, grandmother of Assistant United States Attorney Linda Martinez. Linda interrupted, flipping open her credential case. Civil Rights Division, Department of Justice, badge number 4471. The effect was immediate and electric. Detective Chen's grip loosened involuntarily. Officer Kowalski's face went pale as he stared at the federal credentials in Linda's hand. The crowd of neighbors pressed closer, sensing that the dynamic had shifted dramatically. Tom Bradley's mouth fell open as he read the badge and identification card. That's impossible," Officer Kowalski stammered. "You're just a grandmother." "I'm both," Linda said calmly. "I'm a federal prosecutor who specializes in cases involving civil rights violations under color of law, and I'm a grandmother who just watched 2 local police officers commit multiple federal crimes against her disabled grandson." Detective Chen quickly released Linda's arm and stepped back. "Ma'am, if you'd identified yourself as federal law enforcement—" "I shouldn't have to," Linda interrupted. "My grandson's civil rights don't depend on my professional credentials. Every citizen, including disabled children, has the right to be treated with dignity and respect by law enforcement." Officer Kowalski looked down at the scattered pieces of Jaden's tablet, and Linda could see the moment when he realized the magnitude of his mistake. Destroying the medical equipment of a disabled child was bad enough. Doing it in front of a federal prosecutor was career suicide. "Look, we can work this out," he said, his voice taking on a pleading tone. "Maybe we overreacted a little. Heat of the moment. You understand?" Linda smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Oh, we're definitely going to work this out, Officer Kowalski, but not the way you're thinking." She reached into her other pocket and withdrew her phone, swiping to open an app that most people wouldn't recognize. But Detective Chen's eyes widened as she saw the DOJ monitoring interface. "What's that?" Kowalski asked nervously. "This is very interesting," Linda said, studying her phone screen. "It appears that Jaden's tablet was equipped with automatic cloud backup and streaming capabilities. Every interaction, every communication, every word spoken around the device was being recorded and uploaded to our Justice Department servers." The color drained from both officers' faces. Detective Chen grabbed for her radio, but Linda held up a hand. "I wouldn't bother calling for backup. Detective, this entire incident has been recorded and transmitted to the Civil Rights Division. My colleagues have been watching this unfold in real time." Linda's phone buzzed with an incoming call. She answered it on speaker, her voice professional and cool. "Martinez here." "Linda, it's Director Walsh. We've been monitoring the situation. Are you and Jaden safe?" The voice was crisp and authoritative, carrying the weight of federal authority. Officer Kowalski looked like he might be sick. "We're physically unharmed, Director, but Jaden's communication device has been destroyed, and we've been threatened with arrest on fabricated terrorism charges." "Understood. Federal warrants are being prepared as we speak. Civil rights violations under Section 1983, destruction of medical equipment, deprivation of rights under color of law, making false statements to intimidate citizens. The full package." Detective Chen made a choking sound. "This is insane. We were just doing our jobs." Director Walsh's voice came through the phone speaker with icy clarity. "Detective Chen, badge 47291, 13 years on the force. 3 prior complaints for excessive force against minorities. Officer Kowalski, badge 8834. Multiple civilian complaints for harassment of disabled individuals. We know exactly who you are and what you've been doing." The crowd of neighbors was growing by the minute as word spread through the community. Linda could see phones being raised, recording the confrontation. Social media would be buzzing within minutes. Linda knelt beside Jaden's wheelchair, her federal credentials still visible in her hand. Her grandson was staring at the broken pieces of his tablet, tears streaming down his face. She had seen him cry before, but this was different. This was the sound of a child's trust being shattered, of innocence being destroyed by casual cruelty. "Jaden, honey, look at me," she said softly. "Grandma's going to fix this. Okay, we're going to make sure this never happens to any other child." Officer Kowalski made one last desperate attempt to salvage the situation. "Look, federal prosecutor or not, we had reasonable suspicion of surveillance activity. Any court will back our actions." Linda stood up, her expression hardening. "Officer Kowalski, you just claimed that a 10-year-old autistic child using a communication device at a community barbecue constituted reasonable suspicion of terrorism. You destroyed medical equipment belonging to a disabled minor. You threatened to separate a child from his legal guardian without cause. You made false accusations of espionage against American citizens. And you did all of this while being recorded by federal surveillance equipment." She paused, letting the weight of his situation sink in. "How exactly do you think that's going to play in court?" Tom Bradley, who had been standing paralyzed throughout the exchange, finally found his voice. "Linda, I had no idea you were... I mean, if we had known..." "Known what?" "Tom, that I was a federal prosecutor. Would that have made Jaden's civil rights more important? Would that have made his need for communication more legitimate?" Tom's face flushed red. "That's not what I meant." "That's exactly what you meant. You were perfectly willing to ban a disabled child from community events until you learned that his grandmother could fight back. That tells me everything I need to know about the leadership of this community." Linda's phone buzzed again. This time it was a text message. "Federal agents en route. ETA 10 minutes. Full media response requested." She showed the message to Officer Kowalski, whose face went from pale to gray. "Officer, I'm going to give you one opportunity to make this right. You can resign immediately, apologize publicly to my grandson, and cooperate fully with the federal investigation. Or you can dig in your heels and face the full weight of the Justice Department." Detective Chen grabbed Kowalski's arm. "Bradley, take the deal. We're dead if this goes federal." But Kowalski's pride was stronger than his common sense. "I'm not apologizing to some retarded kid and his terrorist grandmother." The slur hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Several neighbors gasped audibly. Even those who had been sympathetic to the officer's position suddenly looked uncomfortable. Linda felt something cold and dangerous settle in her chest. She had prosecuted hate crimes for 15 years. She had seen the worst of human nature, the depths of cruelty that people could reach when they dehumanized others. But hearing that word applied to her grandson, in front of their entire community, was a bridge too far. "Officer Kowalski," she said, her voice deadly quiet. "You just used a hate speech slur against a disabled child in front of 40 witnesses and federal recording equipment. You've also just guaranteed that I will personally ensure you face the maximum penalty for every single crime you've committed today." The sound of sirens was growing closer. But these weren't local police sirens. These were the distinct sound of federal vehicles, unmarked cars, with powerful engines and specialized equipment. Detective Chen made one last attempt to distance herself from her partner. "I want to clarify that I never used that language. I was just following standard procedure for investigating suspicious activity." Linda turned to her, and Chen saw something in her eyes that made her step back. "Detective Chen, you watched your partner destroy a disabled child's medical equipment. You threatened to arrest me for protecting my grandson. You participated in fabricating terrorism charges against American citizens. You don't get to claim the moral high ground because you didn't use a slur. The federal vehicles were pulling into the community center parking lot now. Linda could see the FBI logos on the sides of the cars. The federal agents stepping out in their crisp suits and sunglasses. Tom Bradley approached Linda hesitantly. What's going to happen to the community? To the HOA? Linda looked around at the crowd of neighbors, many of whom were now filming the arriving federal agents. That depends on what you do next. Tom, you have a choice. You can stand with families like mine, or you can continue to enable discrimination and hatred. But understand this, the Department of Justice will be watching. Agent Sarah Morrison, whom Linda recognized from previous cases, approached with her credentials displayed. Agent Morrison, FBI Civil Rights Division. We're here to take Officers Kowalski and Chen into custody on federal charges. Officer Kowalski made one final desperate play. This is entrapment. She set us up. She knew we were coming and prepared this whole scenario. Agent Morrison looked at him with professional dispassion. Officer, are you claiming that you were entrapped into destroying a disabled child's communication device? She didn't tell us she was a federal prosecutor. And why would that matter? Are you saying you would have treated the child differently if his grandmother had different professional credentials? Kowalski's mouth opened and closed wordlessly as he realized he had just admitted to discriminatory policing practices. Detective Chen tried a different approach. Agent Morrison, we're willing to cooperate fully with your investigation. We realize mistakes were made. Detective Chen, you are under arrest for violating the civil rights of American citizens under color of law. You have the right to remain silent. Linda watched with grim satisfaction as both officers were handcuffed and led away. The crowd of neighbors stood in stunned silence, many of them clearly struggling to process what they had just witnessed. Agent Morrison approached Linda. The director wants to know if you need medical assistance for your grandson. Linda looked at Jaden, who was still staring at the broken pieces of his tablet. He needs a replacement communication device immediately, and he needs to see that justice is possible, that the system can work for people like him. Already arranged. We have a pediatric specialist en route with a replacement tablet, preloaded with his communication software. The cloud backup means we can restore all his customizations within an hour. For the first time since the incident began, Linda felt tears threaten to fall. Thank you. Tom Bradley approached them nervously. Linda, what can the HOA do to make this right? Linda considered the question carefully. First, you can formally apologize to Jaden in front of the entire community. Second, you can implement comprehensive accessibility policies that ensure no family ever faces what we face today. Third, you can provide mandatory disability awareness training for all community leaders. Done, Tom said immediately. What else? I want a memorial fund established for disability rights advocacy, and I want every community event to have accessible communication devices available for anyone who needs them. Agent Morrison smiled. Actually, that's not going to be your decision to make. Linda looked at her questioningly. The Justice Department is filing a federal civil rights lawsuit against the city, the police department, and the HOA. The settlement will include comprehensive accessibility requirements and substantial monetary damages. This case is going to set a precedent that protects disabled individuals across the country. The pediatric specialist arrived as Agent Morrison was speaking. Dr. Jennifer Park was a small, energetic woman who specialized in autism communication technology. She approached Jaden with gentle confidence, speaking to him directly rather than over his head. Hi, Jaden. I'm Dr. Park. I heard someone broke your talking tablet. That must have been really scary. Jaden looked up at her, his eyes still red from crying. He nodded slowly. I brought you a new one. It's got all your old words and pictures, plus some new ones I think you might like. Want to see? For the first time in hours, Jaden showed interest in something other than the broken pieces of his old device. Doctor, Park opened a case and revealed a tablet identical to his destroyed one, but with a protective case covered in his favorite cartoon characters. She powered it on and handed it to him. Jaden's fingers flew over the screen, checking his favorite apps, his customized vocabulary, his personal settings. Everything was exactly as he had left it. His first words through the new device were, "Thank you. I was scared." The simple statement, delivered in the tablet's synthesized voice, hit the crowd of onlookers like a physical blow. Here was a child who had been terrorized, whose means of communication had been destroyed, who had been labeled a terrorist and threatened with separation from his family, and his response was gratitude and honesty about his fear. Mrs. Henderson, who had been standing silently with tears streaming down her face, stepped forward. Jaden, honey, I'm so sorry. I should have done more to help you. Jaden looked at her and then at his tablet. His finger moved carefully across the screen. It's okay. Bad men are gone now. The forgiveness of a 10-year-old child seemed to unlock something in the crowd. One by one, neighbors began approaching to apologize, to express their shame at not speaking up, to promise to do better in the future. But Linda knew that apologies, while necessary, were not enough. Real change required structural transformation, accountability, and ongoing vigilance. 3 weeks later, Linda stood in the same community center, but the atmosphere was completely different. The space was packed with neighbors, media representatives, federal officials, and disability rights advocates from across the state. The federal lawsuit had been settled faster than anyone had expected. The city had agreed to pay $2.3 million in damages, implement comprehensive police training on disability rights, and establish an independent oversight committee for civil rights violations. The HOA had agreed to an additional $500,000 settlement, which would fund accessibility improvements throughout the community and establish the Jaden's Voice program, an initiative that provided communication devices and support services to disabled individuals throughout the region. Officer Kowalski had been sentenced to 2 years in federal prison for civil rights violations. Detective Chen had received probation and mandatory community service, but her law enforcement career was over. More importantly, the case had attracted national attention. The video of the incident, recorded by multiple neighbors and federal surveillance equipment, had gone viral. The image of a uniformed officer destroying a disabled child's communication device had become a powerful symbol of the systemic discrimination faced by people with disabilities. Linda took the stage to address the crowd. Jaden sat in the front row, his new tablet in his lap, surrounded by classmates and neighbors who had become fierce advocates for his rights. 3 weeks ago, my grandson was labeled a terrorist for using a communication device at a community barbecue. Linda began. Today, we're here to celebrate the launch of a program that will ensure no child ever faces that kind of discrimination again. The applause was thunderous. Linda waited for it to die down before continuing. Jaden's Voice is more than just a program that provides communication devices. It's a commitment to seeing the humanity in every person, regardless of their abilities or differences. It's a promise that we will never again allow fear and ignorance to silence the voices of our most vulnerable community members. She paused, looking out at the crowd. My grandson taught me something important through this ordeal. He showed me that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the willingness to trust in justice, even when the world seems determined to prove you wrong. Jaden stood up from his seat and approached the microphone. The crowd fell silent as he positioned his tablet and began to type. His synthesized voice filled the room. Thank you for giving me back my voice. Thank you for making sure other kids like me can talk too. Thank you for showing me that good people are stronger than bad people. The standing ovation lasted for nearly 5 minutes. Linda watched through tears as her community transformed by crisis into something better than it had been before, celebrated her grandson's courage and resilience. Later, as the crowd dispersed and the media packed up their equipment, Linda and Jaden sat alone in the community center. The same space where he had been terrorized and dehumanized had become a place of triumph and transformation. Grandma, Jaden typed into his tablet, are the bad policemen really gone? Linda considered her answer carefully. The ones who hurt you are gone, sweetheart. But there might be other bad policemen out there. That's why we have to keep working to make things better. Jaden nodded solemnly. I want to help other kids who can't talk. You already are, honey. Every time you use your voice, every time you stand up for yourself, every time you show the world who you really are, you're helping other kids. Jaden smiled and typed, I love you. Grandma, thank you for protecting me. Linda hugged him tightly, feeling the weight of responsibility and the lightness of hope in equal measure. They had won this battle, but the war for dignity and justice would continue, and she knew that Jaden, with his quiet courage and unwavering honesty, would be leading the charge. As they prepared to leave the community center, Linda's phone buzzed with a text message from Director Walsh. Congratulations on the settlement. The president wants to meet Jaden. Are you available next month? Linda showed the message to Jaden, whose eyes widened with excitement. He quickly typed his response, Can I bring my tablet to the White House? Linda laughed, the first genuine laugh she'd had in weeks. Yes, honey. You can definitely bring your tablet to the White House. I think the president would love to hear your voice. They walked out of the community center together, grandmother and grandson, prosecutor and victim, advocates and survivors. Behind them, the banner for Jaden's voice hung proudly in the window, a symbol of transformation and hope. The battle had been won, but more importantly, a community had been changed. Fear had been replaced by understanding, exclusion by inclusion, silence by voice. And at the center of it all was a 10-year-old boy who had refused to let anyone take away his right to be heard. In the months that followed, the Jaden's Voice program expanded to serve hundreds of disabled individuals across the region. The story of the community barbecue became a case study in law schools and police academies, a powerful example of how discrimination can be challenged and overcome. Linda returned to her work at the Justice Department with renewed purpose, carrying with her the lessons learned from her grandson's courage, and Jaden continued to grow and thrive, his voice both literal and metaphorical growing stronger with each passing day. The picnic table had been replaced, the broken tablet had been disposed of, and the officers responsible had been held accountable. But the real victory was more profound. A community had learned to listen, to protect its most vulnerable members, and to recognize that true strength comes from lifting up those who need support. Jaden's voice, once silenced by fear and hatred, now echoed through courtrooms and community centers, schools and government buildings, carrying a message of hope and humanity that would resonate for generations to come. The boy who had been labeled a terrorist for using a communication device had become a symbol of courage and resilience. His grandmother, who had been threatened with arrest for protecting him, had become a champion of civil rights and justice. Together, they had proven that even in the darkest moments, when power seems stacked against the powerless, truth and justice can prevail. They had shown that one voice, even a synthesized voice from a tablet, can change the world. And in the end, that was the most powerful lesson of all, that every voice matters, every person has value, and every child deserves to be heard.